up here in Cape Town. I grew up in Joburg. Good old Josie. And I actually grew up in the northern parts of Joburg, and technically on the other side of the Yixkay River, which in Gauteng is regarded as the Boerewors curtain. So I grew up a Blue Bull supporter, believe it or not, and if you see how far I've come, then salvation is open to anyone. Is I think a message for some of us this morning. And then what you might not expect from someone growing up in Gauteng is that I grew up loving the sea and anything related to the sea. So give me a surfboard, a kite surfing rig, give me just a swim in the sea, and I'm really happy. I think coming from a landlocked province, you start to appreciate the sea in a different way. And so as someone who's sort of grown up with that love for the sea and for surfing, you naturally find yourself watching one or two surf films in your life. And I came across one a while ago by, he's a US professional surfer. He lives in Hawaii, Koa Smith. And he came out to Cape Town a while back, and he starts his trip here by going down to Saunders for a cold plunge. There in Bantry Bay. It's like, okay, this is a good start to get a feel for the city and what I can expect. And as he's taking his cold plunge there, he meets these two tannies who are also cold plunging, and he starts chatting to them a bit, and then they start telling him their story, and they say they started cold plunging around lockdown time, so 2020, 2021, and their lives have changed since they started. Like the one lady said, she used to get swelling in her hands and feet. She no longer gets that swelling. And the other Tani was like, I used to take a handful of pills, and now I'm down to one. And Ko's standing there, and he's like, I'm freezing cold, but this is amazing. Like this is a really interesting story. And I looked at that, and I was like, wow, that reminds me of an account in one of the Gospels. And that is of the lame man at the pool of Bethesda. So, surprise from someone who loves surfing, that's a passage we're going to look at this morning, is the one gospel account where you've got water and a pool involved. So we're going to go to John chapter 5 for that. But before we jump into it, I want to give us a bit of a context around where we find ourselves there. So John is the fourth of the four gospel accounts that we have in the New Testament. So we have Matthew, Mark, and Luke are regarded as the synoptic gospels. And the reason for that is they all have a similar theme. And that is they take you on the journey of the life of Jesus while he walked here on earth. And they're written in a way that leads us or prompts us to ask, who is this man? To ask, could this be the Messiah? And then John is written later. It's the latest of the four Gospels. And John takes a different angle and from the outset acknowledges Jesus as the Messiah, as Christ, as God who came down to his people. And that you see in John chapter 1 where he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then you see that later reference to Jesus being the Word made flesh. So that's really the intention and the approach that John takes when he depicts the gospel. And to do that, we see there's 7 signs or miracles in the Gospel of John that all serve to reinforce or support this claim that is made in the first chapter. And the healing at the pool of Bethesda is the third miracle in the series of miracles that John accounts for. The first two, the first was Jesus turning water to wine at the wedding in Cana, and the second was the healing of the official's son in John 4. So that's the context where we find ourselves now in John chapter 5. And before we jump into it, I actually want to give us a moment to maybe take out your phones or your Bibles and go to the translation that you enjoy reading from. And you'll have a bit of color from this in a little while to understand. But as I read through it here, I'll be reading from the ESV. Maybe just follow in the translation. I know some of us enjoy a NIV or a New King James. So yeah, whatever the feel is, go for it. So I'll give us a quick sec there. Reading from verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed. So there's quite a bit going on in this passage, and there are a number of nuances here as well. And I believe that when we understand those, we'll start to really get a sense of what this miracle meant for this man and what it means for us as well, and the invitation for us today. So starting in verse 1, we see that this healing takes place in Jerusalem, and specifically during the time of the feast of the Jews, as John refers to it. So we don't know exactly which one of the feasts this was, but it was most likely one of the 3 major Jewish feasts that every Jewish male 21 years and older would have been required to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate. So that could have been the Feast of Tabernacles, Pentecost, or Passover. So it could have been one of those 3. If you've watched The Chosen, you would have seen that they've portrayed it as taking place during the Feast of Tabernacles, but we don't know that for certain. So it could have been any one of those feasts. Then we see in verse 2 that this healing specifically takes place at the sheep gate. So you might be asking, what is the sheep gate? So at that time, the city of Jerusalem was a walled city. And so there were a number of gates that people would use to enter and exit the city. And this sheep gate was specifically located in the northeastern part of the city of Jerusalem, and it was located in the vicinity of the temple, because it was the gate that Jewish men would need to use to bring their sheep to the temple for sacrifice. So you didn't simply bring your sculpture piece through any gate when you got to come by there in Jerusalem. You had to use the sheep gate. That was the specific gate you had to use. And then we see that near to the sheep gate is a pool called the Pool of Bethesda. So we also don't know exactly, but it was most likely that this pool was either fed by an underground freshwater spring or rainwater that was collected and channeled to the pools via aqueducts. And the name Bethesda is derived from 2 Hebrew words, bet and chesed. And they effectively translate to house of mercy. So to give you a sense of sort of a bit of the pool and what was happening here. Now this pool is actually a really interesting place because it has drawn much criticism and skepticism from biblical scholars and archaeologists over the centuries. And the specific reason for that is that there was no archaeological evidence of this pool for many, many years. And as a result, people started to say, okay, if we can't trust the legitimacy and the accuracy of this account in John chapter 5, then we might even have to question the validity of the whole Gospel of John. And that skepticism was centered around the lack of evidence for a pool that matched the description here in John chapter 5. But that was until 1888, when a German archaeologist named Konrad Schick uncovered this large rectangular pool structure with two basins that was surrounded by covered walkways and divided by a central partition in a way that matched the description in John chapter 5. So these covered walkways are the five colonnades that John chapter 5 refers to. So for those of us who've been fortunate enough to go to Jerusalem, you would most likely have seen the site, and that's something like what you would have seen. And from this photo, it looks quite confusing because you might ask, where's the water and where's the pool? So the water today has been diverted, so you don't get that same feel as in the time of this healing. And what you see there as well is also a combination of a number of the archaeological remains of a Byzantine church that was built in the place of the pool to commemorate the healing that happened there. But it's a little bit tricky to see from the photo, but on the far end, on the bottom part of the floor area there, you might see some steps sort of heading down, and that is believed to be a portion of the steps that led into the south pool, that people at these pools would use to enter the water. And after this initial discovery in the 1800s, in the 1960s, further excavations were done, and they discovered a larger pool complex that effectively measured over 100 meters in length, more than 50 meters wide, and the pool was up to 15 meters deep in certain places. So in the next slide, you'll see there's a bit of a recreation of what that might have looked like in the time of Jesus. Then near the city gates, you have this large pool complex. And the reason for giving us some detail and color around it is to try imagine yourselves in that place that Jesus found himself. And imagine that it might have been hundreds of people, possibly even thousands during these times of the feast, that would come and sit around this pool in hope of healing and in hope of wholeness and restoration. So when we read then in verse 3 that there was a multitude of blind, lame, and paralyzed people, you start to get a feel for what was happening here. And the archaeological findings are interesting because they reveal a second piece to the story. And that was the reason that I wanted us to read from the specific translation. So if you read from the ESV and the NIV, you would have read something very similar to what I read. But if you were sharp, you would have noticed that we skipped verse 4. Yes, we have someone. Well done, Vanessa. And the reason for that is that there is a verse 4 that will pop up in some of your other translations. So NKJV and some of the others, it is there. And that's a verse that you might also have heard before. And that's the one of an angel of the Lord coming down at a specific time, stirring the water, and the first person to enter being healed. So the reason that it's not in some of our translations is that verse appeared in early manuscripts of the Gospel of John, but it didn't appear in the earliest versions. And so out of an abundance of caution, certain translations do not include this verse, although they reference that in other translations, you will find that. So from that, we can already say we don't know exactly what was happening at this pool. And sort of in that place, then you have some of the archaeological findings that are quite interesting. And that is that in those excavations, they also found evidence that this pool complex had been dedicated to the Greco-Roman god Asclepius around 70 AD. So roughly 40 years after this miracle might have taken place. So to understand that a bit better, Asclepius was believed to be the son of Apollo and was worshipped almost as a savior, and specifically as the god of healing and medicine. And the beliefs around Asclepius originated in Greece and spread quite rapidly, and they had spread to Rome roughly 300 years before Jesus' birth. And by the time of this healing had become one of the most popular beliefs in the Greco-Roman world at the time. And those who followed this belief were known to dedicate these temples to this god as centers for healing pilgrimages, where people would come and bathe, make offerings, and sleep in these places with the hope that they would receive divine instruction and healing. So within the context of all of that, I think it's important to acknowledge that we don't know exactly what this man and the others who are lying around that pool may have believed the pool could give them. But within that uncertainty, there is very much a chance that this man and the others may have been influenced by that cultural and societal belief in this god of healing and in what could be offered by what the culture and beliefs of the time held to be true. And so you've really got a mix of different things happening here at the pool. So you've got the potential of an angel coming down and stirring the waters. You've got the beliefs in this Roman god that might bring healing. You've got this Tani's account that the cold plunging cured her swelling limbs. And so in the mix of all of that, that's where Jesus steps in. And that's where we read from verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." So what this man is saying to Jesus, "Sir, do you not understand how it works here at the pool of Bethesda? Can you not see that the others here have people to help them in? Can you not see that they might have ailments that do not prevent them from getting into the water? Can you not see that I have no way of getting in? Jesus, do you not understand how this place works?" And I want you to see that this man's view of how he could be healed was so warped because it was completely influenced by the promise of this pool and the beliefs of the world around him. He's effectively saying to Jesus, "Sir, I have to get into this pool and I have to be in first, otherwise there's no way for me to be healed. That is the only way this happens." And is that not what happens to many of us today? Is that not where we often find ourselves? I think one example that comes to mind, and it's a thought that I've had a couple times, is in relation to money and its relationship with security. And thinking that thought of, if only I had X amount of money, I would be able to look up, take a breath. I wouldn't have to worry about how to make the rent payments or the mortgage payments from one month to the next. You might think, sure, if only I could afford a home in that specific area, then my kids would be guaranteed to get a good education. You might even then get to that point where you have the luxury of taking a breath and looking up, and you might look around you at what the world offers and the excitement of this new thing or this new destination and think, I have that security now, but my life would have so much meaning if only I could be there, or if only I could be doing that, or if only I could have that thing. And that's what's happening with this man here. You see, he thought that he needed to be first into the pool, but what he truly needed was to be healed. And if we often look at the motivation of our hearts in many aspects of life, and it often translates into the area of finances and material things, we see that what we truly need, what our hearts desperately seek for, is security and meaning. And I really get a sense this morning that the Lord wants to meet us in that place. And while we've been looking for that in a whole bunch of other places, that He wants to come to us and ask, do you want to be healed? And our longing might be for physical healing, but it might not necessarily be for that at this point in our lives. But there is a desperation in all of us that runs potentially as deep as this man's desperation for physical healing. And it might be that we look for it in wealth and possessions. It might be in the love and affection of another. It might be in career success, in winning and coming first. It might even be in the feeling that we're a good person and we're doing good things for the world. But for any of us who've pursued these things for long enough, we know that they always fall short, they always disappoint, and they never bring that healing that our hearts so crave. Because the world consistently comes and it bombards us with this promise that what it has to offer is enough. And I catch myself getting caught by this so easily. And it reminds me of a story the other day of Raquel and I when we went shopping together. So we recently moved, and since we moved down, we haven't had a TV. So we felt like, okay, it was now the right time to get a TV. So I go ahead, I do all the research, I go through to Hirsch's there, I chat to Nizam, he helps me out really nicely with his TV, and I go in with an idea of the size, and then as I walk in, probably 5 minutes after that, I'm convinced, okay, I should probably get the TV that's a little bit bigger than that first one I thought I should get. And then I'm patient. I don't make the decision there. I go back, I do a bit more research, and then I'm like, okay, Leaf, I think I found the right TV. Let's go. I want to show you, and then we can pull the trigger. So we go to Hirsch's, we get there, take Raquel through the aisle. I'm like, this is the TV. And she's like, really? It's so big. And then she looks around and she's like, how about the smaller one? Why don't we take the smaller one? And I'm like, Leaf, you've looked at this for all of 1 minute. And I've spent so many hours. This is really value for money, you know? This is really the one we should get. And then Nizam sees us there. He's like, this couple's going to need about 10 minutes. So he gives us some space. And as we're chatting through it, I quickly realized Raquel is right, that is the one we should be getting. But I was like, why am I wrestling with it? Why am I fighting it? Why do I not want to acknowledge that? And I realized that if I look deep in my heart, the reason that I wanted the bigger TV was because of the TVs I'd seen my friends have. And I was like, I realized I carved a little bit of this, a little section of hope out, and I put it in that TV, and I was like, if I get that one, then I know I'm sort of keeping up with the people around me, and I feel like, okay, my life has meaning in that little slice. And then I was fighting that, and I was like, okay, but now I can look for a good reason for this TV. And then I was like, Leaf, but can you imagine watching The Chosen on that TV? Could you imagine the revelation we get from that TV? And then I realized, no, I'm just like, that's just covering up my true intentions. And at the end of the day, I had to tell Nizam, sorry, man, we have to go for the smaller TV. And it was just a really revealing moment for me at how quickly our hearts can almost get caught by the promise of something. And it can be as small as that, but it can extend across the spectrum to things that are a lot bigger and consume huge part of our lives and influence significant portions of how we make decisions and how we respond to things. So, yeah, the world is constantly telling us this, and that's why situations like this are revealing, but it's also encouraging when we see others who've almost achieved everything that the world would say you can achieve, coming out and saying that those things are actually empty. And that reminds me of a quote from Jim Carrey, who has achieved a huge amount in the acting world, who came out and said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to get at with this guy at the pool. He wanted him to almost get to this place. And he asked that question of, do you want to be healed for a specific purpose? And I think there are two reasons that he asked that. The first is that we must first discern what is truly our heart's deepest need. We need to humbly and honestly discern what is motivating our actions and our decisions. And for this man, it was to acknowledge that he sought all his healing hope in this pool. And the second is that we need to acknowledge that those pools that we falsely put our hope in will always disappoint. And that's what that man was saying, is he was saying, every time there's an opportunity to possibly be healed, someone comes in front of me. Someone goes down before me. There's no one to help me there. And to see that the things we promised outside of Christ would always fall short. And so the sense I get is many of us might find ourselves in that place this morning, in a small sort of carved out portion of our heart, or in a larger portion. We find ourselves in this sort of context of multitudes of broken people, this desperate search for healing and wholeness, and then a potentially confusing sort of mix of, yes, we believe in the Lord and we trust God, but there are also these promises in the world that seem so attractive, and how do we respond to that? And I really sense that right in the center of that, Jesus doesn't run away from that. He steps into that amongst the multitudes of people who are sensing that he's right there. And that's where we read in verse 8. And Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed. And that's really the invitation that Jesus is extending us today and in every day from now on. It's an invitation to get up in faith. It's an invitation to see what we've been seeking in our lives, where we've been putting our hope and our trust, to take up our bed from where we've been sleeping there, and to walk away from that, and to walk into the promise of the healing that Jesus has for us. And it's beautiful if you read on from verse 8, you'll see that when Jesus finds this man again, he finds him in the temple courts. So he hasn't gone back to that pool. He's in a figurative sense, and loosely you could say in a place of where the Lord is being worshipped. And you see that transformation is he doesn't stay there. And it reminds me of a quote from Reinhard Bonke who says, God always works with workers and he moves with movers, but he doesn't sit with sitters. And so there's a genuine invitation to faith this morning, to see in our lives those places that we've been putting hope and trust in, and to respond to the invitation of Jesus to step out and to walk away from those. And if I could maybe ask the band to come up, and as we close off here and go into a time of ministry, I really trust that you see the beautiful picture that God in his sovereignty has created here, is that you have Jesus, who we know would be the perfect sacrifice. So Jesus the Lamb comes to the sheep gate, and he goes to the house of mercy, and he extends mercy to the man desperately seeking mercy. And that is the heart of our Father, that he would go to those places and that he would meet us there. And that healing and that life is one that will never disappoint. It is a living water that Jesus offers us, and that offer is there for us every day. In the small little TVs that we decide to buy or not to buy, or the bigger things in life. Jules, could you hit the lights for us? Thank you. I sense that there are two groups of people this morning that the Lord is really calling. The first is for those of us who have not met this Jesus, who do not know this life and this healing and this wholeness that is on offer, that Jesus is extending his hand to you, and he is inviting you to get up and to walk in that life. And for those, it might be for us who've never heard of who Jesus is, or for us who have and have maybe walked away for a bit, and know that we haven't been in that place with the Lord that we want to be. I want to ask, and if we could get some facilitators up here as well, please, to pray with some people, that you would come up and you would pray with someone, and know that our Father is faithful to meet you there. And the second group of people is for those of us who know we've been putting our faith and our hope in these pools, that we've sat at these pools of false hope for days or weeks or months or even years, and they've just been disappointing. That Jesus is there, and he is extending his hand to you, and he's asking, do you want to be made well? Do you want to taste of the life and the wholeness that only I can give you? And as Jesus didn't need the pool to heal that man, he doesn't need those things that you think you need to be made well. And I want to ask, come up and pray with someone that the invitation from Jesus is there, and he's calling you, and he knows where